easier time getting the 10,000 laptops they needed to disperse to people than the people who were playing catch up 3 weeks later and were further down in the supply chain, right? They entered ahead, they dipped less, they came out of it focused hard. Boston Consulting Group has also done a lot of work in this area, and they've gone all the way back to 1985 and kind of looked at those economic ups and downs and who survives and who thrives. And what they showed was the top performers after any downturn were the ones who reported higher growth than all the other companies. So it wasn't just that they were better at cutting cost. It wasn't just that they were better at doing more with less, but that they anticipated changes in the market, that they had ways of moving and changing quickly that allowed them to increase their revenues and not just cut cost. So the organizations that cut cost did well, but were not the top performers. And you're like, okay, well, that's like beyond my job description, right? Like, I don't have control over those things, but you do a lot of work that supports and empowers that in the rest of the organization. And so we want to talk today about how the work that IT finance does and how being able to talk in terms of service value and not just the cost of IT can help you empower the rest of the organization to be resilient, to be that spring, even when you find yourself landed in a desert. So part of the work that Boston Consulting Group did was to identify different areas of resilience that people excelled in. And there are some of these that have really strong application to financial management if you think about it, right? And so if you think about operational resilience, you might go, well, what they do in the rest of the business isn't something that I control. But if IT's services are aligned with what's happening in the rest of the business and can have those conversations, then you have a working relationship that when the business is about to pivot and you have let's say one of the companies who is an electronics manufacturer who suddenly pivots to make COVID test kits, or a clothing manufacturer who pivots to make masks instead, right? They're being resilient. And IT has to have the relationships and the ability to talk about the services that IT provides in a way that is just as flexible and resilient, or you become an anchor rather than an enabler, right? So it's really important knowing that they're going to be trying to do targeted automation, that they're going to be looking for end-to-end optimization. Then those are things that you need to understand how your services support, right? They talk a lot about financial resilience. Well, this is kind of the obvious place, right? This is where we talk about all the cost takeout actions, procurement rationalization, how do you optimize your supply chain? This is the stuff that most of you have probably been focused on for the last few months and are looking at focusing on ongoing for the next few months. I know that most of our clients have some initiative where they are doing cost takeouts. But the really resilient companies also had market resilience, which means they were not just trying to do less. They were not just hunkering in. They were trying to expand. They were really looking for ways to grow. And we have clients who are doing this. We have clients who are moving initiatives ahead faster because the business is pivoting. They're trying to enhance the customer experience. They're leveraging differences in behaviors that are happening with folks, right? They're understanding that customer segmentation in the same way you as IT finance and technology business management should understand your customer segmentation. Chris started talking about this a good bit in the last session. If you were in Chris Dodera's session, if you weren't there, when the recordings are available, please go back and listen to it, because he was talking about how do you show what portion of the revenues IT services are driving. And that conversation, the ability to talk about the value of your services, not in terms of IT cost, but how you're driving revenue, or how you're helping to optimize the supply chain, or how you are eliminating processes and doing end-to-end optimization and empowering those things those are the value discussions that help to empower the business and make you more relevant. So how do you do that? In all of this, what you're hearing is that the organization as a whole has to have a high level of agility. And the companies that are the most agile and are adaptive are the ones who are going to thrive the most. And that reflects all the way back into IT too. If it takes 2 weeks in order to order a laptop when I'm sending people home tomorrow, then we're in trouble, right? So IT has to be agile in its performance, but IT also has to be agile in their ability to reflect that in their services. So if your services are hardwired and defined and you measure the cost and value of those in a way that every little change takes you 2 weeks in your model to go in and do, then you're in trouble. Because if the organization pivots in a month and you have an entire new set of services that you have to deliver, or a new view of the finances that you have to deliver, and you're doing that all manually and it's going to take you 3 months to get it implemented, you're in trouble, right? And so to be really resilient and survive with the rest of the organization, you have to find ways to build agility into that, whether it's the very definition of your model or the tools that you're using. However you're doing that, it has to be your new mantra. And this is true no matter where you are on your growth curve, right? This is not just for the really mature people. We have clients who are just starting to get to internal transparency and who are seeing great success in having service value discussions with the organization and being able to align the IT budget and the things that they're doing with the things that have meaning to the rest of the organization. That should be designed into what you're doing at every step of the way. It's not an end goal, it's a whole new mindset. Does that make sense to folks? So like, we're on video so you can nod and, oh, awesome. See, it's almost like being in a conference room, isn't it? You can like look to the left, look to the right, and make fun of somebody. So let's look at an example, right? Digital transformation. This is something that was a buzzword before the pandemic. This was something that was a buzzword before the world stood sideways. We were all preparing and looking at digital transformation and innovation and what it meant. And there were reasons, right? There are cost drivers that are important for this, but there were problems going into this. So this is McKinsey findings from before all of this. This was McKinsey findings from the end of 2019. That most businesses, so the folks outside of IT and the folks inside of IT, don't consider themselves to have resilient IT. But they think it's foundational to achieve digital transformation. With that should make us all pause. Now, hopefully, after we've successfully navigated the whole work from home shift and we proved that we can be pretty resilient, I'd be really interested to know how this survey has shifted through that experience. But we know that they don't have 100% faith. And so that's why transparency and active conversations around services and service value is so important, because trust doesn't just happen. It has to be built over time, and it has to be built in ways that are conversational and transparent. And if you can't answer the questions and you can't be transparent, then you're never going to overcome this trust barrier. So why is the business so hot to do this, right? Like, why is it so important? Why are they pushing digital transformation? Well, they've shown that there are revenue impacts, right? And we've already said the companies who are more resilient didn't just cut costs better, they grew better. And so anything that's going to help to drive revenue is important to the rest of the organization. So it has to be important to IT and to IT finance. There's strong concerns. You'll hear people talking about the fact that people who are late getting to digital transformation could be so late that they're obsolete, right? And that this is a real divide in this point in time. It's not merely, well, you know, you're going to be okay and putter along and make $3 billion a year, but you're going to be amazing and make $5 billion a year. No, this is, you're going to go and you're going to make $5 billion a year. And I'm sorry, you're closing down all of your stores and laying off all of your employees and you're done, right? Like when they talk about this digital divide, they're not talking about success and huge success. They're talking about a have and a have not. And so that's why it is so critical for IT to support this and enable it and to really partner with the organization to make this happen. It means a transformation, right? But it's part of the term, right? Digital transformation. But too often transformations feel like this. It's like a Windows system update, right? You're stuck. You can't do anything. You can't go anywhere. And this is a problem. You can't have a transformation that means that we're sitting here twiddling our thumbs. It means that we have to figure out what the cost drivers are and where are the action items. We have to sit down and really lay out a plan that we see ROI at every step of what we do. And this is true for everything, whether it's digital transformation for how we're delivering medicine, or whether it is digital transformation and how you're building and delivering your cost reports and your budget process, right? It's also true with having those service value discussions, right? Like if you can't answer the questions about what drives the cost of those services, if you can't have discussions with the business and understand what brings the value and what kind of value, then you're going to be stuck in that waiting mode rather than seeing incremental process and allowing the years to multiply the power of the actions that you're taking. So it's a partnership, right? It means that you in IT and the business have to talk to each other. And IT finance is one of those areas where the business and IT connects. For a lot of organizations, IT finance or the business management office or the TBM office or whatever you're calling your group has direct pathways out into the business, or you have a partnership with somebody like business relationship managers or somebody who does. But the work that you're doing is integral in this conversation, right? And if your numbers are wrong or your service model is built in a way that doesn't make sense to them, or if it doesn't scale correctly, or it doesn't provide them actionable levers, then this conversation breaks down, right? What the business needs are services that are defined in a way that they understand how it empowers their capabilities and it brings real value to them. And it has actions that they can take, right? So in a session earlier this morning, there was a lot of great conversation around services that have fixed versus variable cost. And not fixed versus variable in the terms of, you know, classic finance, but I bought these servers and even if you stop using them, the organization has to pay for them, right? So those step function costs, software licenses that go for 2 years. And so finding the ways to report and make people understand that you can change your behaviors, but how does it really have impact to the organization overall? There are great ways to do that. We're seeing clients have real success with that. But again, you have to be transparent. You have to talk about the value of this and help them understand how their actions are going to have an impact, not just on their budget, but on the organization overall. So if you cannot become a trusted partner, then you've kind of failed your mission, right? So the goal for all of you for this year coming out, so every year when we do the big gathering, I try and throw out a challenge for the next year. What's your growth point? And for those of you who don't already feel like you are a trusted partner, that you can go to the business and when you tell them something, they don't question everything. It's okay for them to ask questions, but when you're in that antagonistic partnership where you say something, they challenge it, and you say something, they challenge it, like you spend all of your energy just defending things, you don't ever seem to move forward. And so you've got to get past that phase and into the phase where you can say, here's what it costs and here's what your bill is and here's how we're bringing you value. And they go, oh yeah, I remember we talked about this. That makes sense. And you can like move forward and talk about the new things that they're doing and how you can have new impact to them. So the goal is to move from communication to trusted partner. So quick thumbs up, thumbs down for you guys who know how to do this in Zoom. And I'm going to try and maximize my view as much as I can here. How many of you feel like today, and if you don't have your video turned on, I'll pull up the participants list and you can go in and you can use the little yes, no feature as well. I'm curious, how many of you say today that you would confidently say you are a trusted partner to the rest of the organization? And that if you go and you tell them something, they're going to be like, okay, yeah, thumbs up, yes, or thumbs down, no. So I got some thumbs down, some thumbs ups. So first thing, if you're a thumb down, then look around and see who stuck their thumb up and note their name, because those are people you want to connect to and talk to, right? Those are mentors that you want to leverage. If you had your thumbs up, then I want you to take it to the next level, right? The challenge is not become the partner, but how can you come back and tell a story about how you made a significant difference, not just in IT, but to the rest of the organization? How did the work that you did, whether it was providing cost optimization, or whether it was helping to understand and define the value of services that help the business find cost savings, right? So you're not just looking at IT cost savings, but the business cost savings. If you're a trusted partner, I'm sure you're already working on this. So next year when we gather together, I want to hear all those stories. If you're not yet a trusted partner, then that's your goal for next year when we gather again. So it means the rest of the organization, they're going to be successful. They're going to be agile. That means you've got to be agile too, right? You've got to be in a position where you can make changes. Think about the cost model you have if you run one. If there's a big reorg and you're doing things differently, how much work and effort is it going to be for you to remodel that? Are there designs and changes you could make to your modeling proactively that allow you to be more agile? Because remember, the people who were the real resilience were the ones who got out ahead, right? They anticipated potential problems and solve them. And that goes for the work that we do as well. So it's not enough to go, oh, you're reorging. Okay, we're now delivering infrastructure in an entirely different way. Okay, that's great. You operate, and in 3 months from now, I'll have the cost model caught up and we can come back and have a discussion about your real service costs, right? You want to make sure that your model is designed in a way where, you know, they go, hey, we're going to be doing this, and in 5 weeks we're going to be deployed, and at the same time you're making those changes so that you can go, okay, when you're ready, I'll be ready, and you can jointly deploy those things. That takes a lot of relationship building, but it also means that you have to have designs that are agile, that you've done good basic modeling practice that allow you to adapt your modeling as needed. Think about your processes. Think about the people that you have. Are you skilling them? This is a great time. Remember, the real resilience, the people who thrive during a downturn are the people who reinvest in their people and processes. So I've seen several companies who have lots of people from their team who are here at the conference, and that's awesome. You know, it's a virtual conference. The overhead to get people here was really low. So this was a great time to invest in those people and really educate them and hopefully to grow them. What other kinds of opportunities are you working through that you're making sure that you're reskilling people, that you're dual skilling people? This is a great opportunity to take the challenges you face and use them as training opportunities to reinvest in those people. I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to think about agility and flexibility in everything you do during your operations. Before I go forward, I've been talking a lot, and I'm on a roll here, so I'm gonna pause and check. Chris, do we have any questions that are bubbling up? Or if you've got a burning question and it's too much to type, then unmute yourself and ask away.
No, a lot of agreement and emphasis on statements you're already making that getting good agreements from CNG and Kevin, so hitting a chord.
Excellent. Okay. So it's an incremental process, right? You are not going to leap from where you are to your future in one step. And so it's really important to have a roadmap that lays out how you're going to get there and what the steps are to get you there. So again, like, do the thumbs up, thumbs down. Tell me how many of you guys have an active roadmap. I always get my left and right messed up on these things. I'm sorry. So thumbs up if you have an active roadmap that you're following. Thumbs down if you do not. So I see a few people who have roadmapped out. Some people who still don't have a roadmap. Okay, again, another great way to take this time and to invest is to take that time and build out your roadmap now to understand, to get from where you are now to where you want to be on your journey. What are the steps you need to take? People and processes, data and systems, reporting, IT storytelling. How do you get to the point where you're telling the story of IT in terms of the value that you're bringing to the business and not just reporting out Excel spreadsheets of numbers, right? If you don't have a roadmap that covers all of those things, then that's a task that you need to tackle. And this is a great time to do it and to leverage your people to come together for that. So it's bitwise, right? You're going to have the little steps. At every step, you should see some success. We don't want to get it to a point where a transformation is a spinning cycle and you're just waiting and waiting. Okay, I got to minimize my little screen here, guys. Sorry. I like your faces, but I need to see your slides again. So the most important thing through all of this is thinking about, again, the core of what resilience means. And it means being able to survive under pressure. It means being able to respond to the changes that the rest of the business is going to make and is going to demand on IT and being able to track those. It's being the difference between being an organization that went into work from home and could easily go into their automation system and set up a few tags and can now easily report on how much spending they're doing on COVID and have that discussion versus the people that I talked to who went, we get a date range and we're pretty sure we're just going to call everything in that date range COVID spending, right? Or we're going to go back later and have somebody manually go through and tag things line by line by line and decide, right? You can, which of those organizations do you want to live in, right? You don't, you know, you're not operating at top performance and helping the organization the way you should be if you're having to go back after the fact, if you're always playing catch up, right? The reporting that you guys are doing mapped properly to service value and service capability has the ability to highlight for the rest of the organization where they can make changes in their processes and have real bottom line revenue impact, whether it's positive or negative. And we've seen this happen with clients multiple times. We've seen clients who, in doing this, were able to point out that the rest of the organization had processes that were duplicates and were consuming the same services from IT. And the organization was allowed to streamline themselves, huge cost savings, where IT could present and go, hey, you're doing this thing and I have a way to make it better with technology. Whether it's delivery of telemedicine or automation and shipping and shipment tracking, we've seen several different things happen where IT's vision and knowledge, when you have that trusted partnership relationship, mean that you can go to them with suggestions, and IT finance can do what if modeling and build the scenarios to quickly and agilely be able to show whether there's a difference or not, right? We worked with another client who had a large change coming to their data center. And because they were able to do what if modeling and had systems where they could work in a very agile way, were able to show the impact and prevent some huge extra expenses to the rest of the organization, right? You're going to catch and see things that nobody else is, because if you're bringing together all of this information, you're bringing financial, human resource, asset, operational data all together, you're doing that really good analysis of it, if you're doing it in a way that's agile, you can take it and duplicate it and change a factor and duplicate it and change a factor. And being able to do a duplication and figure out what all the iterations would be like, you can be the successful springs and avoid being the ones that end up kind of crumpled and twisted and trying to cope after the fact. So, we're always here. We know that many of you, and I've had fun having conversations with some of you earlier today, have had great success stories, and I'm looking forward to hearing more success stories to folks. But if you ever hit a point where you're like, not sure how to get from A to B, we're always willing to have a conversation with you. But even more than that, this is a mantra that if you guys don't already have it, is something to reflect out, right? So your goal is not to meet your budget. Your goal is not for IT to spend the right amount of money. Your goal, the reason that IT exists, is to empower the rest of the organization to be successful. And so even if you hit your budget and you spend the right amount of money, if you're not empowering them to be successful, then you're really not getting your job done and you're not being effective. Questions?
All right, man, we've got a couple that are in, and feel free to submit them in the chat back on the platform in your web browser. First one's from Sanjeev, is talking about how does IT get a seat at the table? We know that it's business, IT and the business need to have a close relationship, but that doesn't always start. So how do you build that, whether you have a ITFM or TBM model today?
Sure. So a couple of different things. So one, I will tell you, we have a good white paper on how to start the conversation. So that's something you might want to hit our website and go download, because it can be a long conversation. But one is you have to understand them. And so if you go to the rest of the organization and you're trying to have a conversation about IT, you're going to get shut down. That's not a way to build that relationship. Just like every server admin and database admin and everybody in IT already has too many things on their plate, the folks in the rest of the business are in the same situation, right? They already have a million other things they have to do. They really don't want to talk about IT. They want to talk about the stuff they're doing. So you need to find a way to have at least somebody target it. Don't try to do the whole organization at once, right? Find somebody who you think, I know enough about that section of the business that we could have this conversation. Reach out to the person that's appropriate and, hey, look, I really want to make sure that we're supporting you. I want to make sure I really understand what you're doing. Can you tell me about what you do, right? And have that conversation to really understand the rest of the business. Can I buy you a coffee? Can we have a virtual lunch? However you guys are interacting right now, understand them, and then take the time to figure out how what you're doing applies to them. Come back to those capabilities and be able to show in the numbers how you're having an impact to that. You start having an impact with one group and they talk to each other, right? And it's going to spread. There's a bit of osmosis that happens as there's a success story, then somebody else wants another success story, and then somebody else wants another success story. And nobody in the business wants to be left behind, right? There's a little bit of competition. If you have multiple product lines or multiple divisions, trust me, there's a little bit of competition that gets set up. The other thing that's really important is to make sure that you understand what the CEO's goal and the board of directors goals are for the organization, and think about how what you're doing and the services that you provide map to those things. And if you can't figure it out, that's when you go to that person out in the business and you have this kind of like, hey, we're doing these things. I know you're doing those things. Let's talk about how we are working together to meet that person's goals. And those conversations, we have a client who just recently ended up presenting at a board of directors meeting because they had the insights that the board really wanted to hear. And so you have to talk in their language. That's the first step. What else we got, Chris?
We've got one from Carmen. It's kind of, I think it's a follow-on really to what you were just discussing, is when you talk about being a trusted partner to the business, what are they looking for? So I think you talked about how we get that seat at the table, but what do you think makes TBM, ITFM trusted in the long run?
So transparency, right? Talking in ways that are actionable to them. being able to go and give them a report of how many CPUs they're consuming is meaningless, and they just get frustrated because they feel like it's a waste of their time and they already have too many things to do, right? Like, I don't have control over how many CPUs this application is using. So fine, great. You tell me that's how it costs and that's why, but it's out of their control. So when you have conversations where they can have actionable levers, oh, here's how much every license costs. And when you reduce a license, here's how much your cost is going to reduce, which may not be the same numbers. That's actionable for them. Then they can make a decision. So when you're talking with them in ways that make them smarter, that make them more successful, think about it like having a boss, right? Like, how do you succeed with a boss? You succeed with your boss by making your boss look good and making them more successful. And it's the same thing with the business. What's going to happen is you'll get past that initial stage and they'll be like, hey, you've done these great things for me. I really trust you. I'm going to ask you some other questions. And they come to you as more of an advisor rather than as somebody who's providing a service. It takes time. Any other questions hanging out there? Is there anybody who has something that you don't want to type? We got just a few minutes left before our mandatory break.
There are no more in the chat.
So I'll do some plugs then. We've got a showcase at 4:30. If you want to come and learn how we can help you through some of this, we're glad to talk with you more about that. We are also, though, hosting once a month live streams that are discussion sessions, right? So we have like a fireside chat or a panel of people, but they're meant to be open discussions, and we're doing those for the rest of the year. Those are free. Again, we want to see the community come together to allow you guys to connect to each other and to keep conversations about how to get better at this practice going all the time, right? So these conferences are critical. We want to have them continue. So we started it back in April. It's usually the third Thursday, but because tomorrow is the third Thursday, this month it will be next Thursday. So I can post out the information for how you can get to that. And we'd love to see you guys show up and continue your conversations in those as well. Anything else that we can answer for you guys? You're all master experts or you're all incredibly burnt out?
One more question did just come in regarding planning. As you think about beyond just looking at our actual cost, how you look at the financial planning process. Does IT need to look at different ways of managing their planning, zero-based budgets, other different processes?
So I could go for about an hour and a half on rolling forecasts. And if you guys have not had the conversation with the organization yet, you're not thinking about how to move to a rolling forecast and not an annual process, then let me buy you a drink and we need to have that conversation, because everybody that we've worked with, and everybody, even if we haven't worked with them, other people that we know who have moved to this process get their cost variance down below 1 or 2%. Just on a regular basis, right? And again, that's part of that trust. If your budget variance is always 10 or 20% or 8% or something crazy, then the rest of the business looks at you and says, IT doesn't know what they're doing. What's the problem? Well, it's really not IT's fault. Asking IT to try and plan 12 or 18 months from now the cost of projects that the business may or may not do, because the business is agile and changes what they do in less than a 12 or 18 month period, is kind of crazy, right? Like, it's asking for failure. They're setting you up for failure. So even if you have an annual report out that you need to do to corporate finance and paperwork and things you have to do, you should be doing a rolling forecast every month. And that rolling forecast process should just, like, when it's time for the annual, you just kind of plug and chug. It's like, it's not an event anymore. It's just a reporting event. And people go, oh my God, it takes me the entire team 3 months to do annual planning. There's no way we can do this every month. But when you do it every month, it takes much less work and your accuracy goes way, way up. So let's do the quick hands up. Who are people who already do rolling forecasts in the room? check your list, look around. These are the people that you want to go talk to, right? Don't just take my word for it. I'm telling you, it makes a world of difference. It is a life changer, right? So if you go from just looking at this and trying to figure out why your variance is always out of control to doing a rolling forecast, that's the very first step I would tell you to take. And see, so I told you, like, I could talk really a long time on that one. So really, was there any other questions we need to squeeze in, Chris?
Last one was really just, hitting on any new trends you're seeing in the development of ITFM, TBM.
So move to products is becoming much more common, especially Gartner is pushing products much more. I've seen a lot of organizations who are starting to shift and think about what they do in terms of products and not just services. That's a whole another conversation, but I'm glad to have it with folks one-on-one, or we could spin up a small group, or if a lot of you tell me we want to talk about it, we'll move it to one of the monthly discussions. The other thing is capability mapping. It doesn't have to wait until you're at fully defined business services, right? You start thinking about capability mapping, business capability mapping, as early as you can in your maturity, having those conversations as you go along. And so we're seeing people pull that conversation in earlier and earlier in their journey and having huge success with it. I know that Ginger Allen, if she's in the room here, or if she's not, she is at this conference, Ginger can tell you amazing stories about how being able to talk about business capabilities has helped them. And, they're still in the middle route of their journey. They're by no means fully mature at this point. So sorry to call you out, Ginger.
All good.
All right, I think that is all, Nan.
So I want one last one from me, thumbs up or thumbs down. Who is getting value and enjoying the conference so far? Awesome. I am so glad to see that. I'm looking forward to engaging with you guys for the rest of today and all day tomorrow. And then we'll keep the conversations going. So have fun connecting, have great conversations. Thanks so much for spending a little time with me.